Whoever you may be listening, wherever you may be listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Don Andrew, and joined every week by my main man, Richie Bradshaw. Before we get into the first wave of free agency, go to follow us on Twitter or X, whatever the cool kids call it, at RichieBrads36, at Don Andrew, and follow our work at allcardinals.com or SI.com/NFL/Cardinals. Like, subscribe. You guys hear it all the time, but the support is really, really appreciated. Richie, we are day 2 into the NFL free agency frenzy. It has definitely calmed down a little bit. I think right before we started recording here, Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm not sure there's going to be a bigger move than that today, but a lot of big names, a lot of big deals. The Arizona Cardinals were not one of those teams to make one of those very, very big splashes. Go to allcardinals.com. I'm going to put a bunch of articles in the description as to why that is a good thing, why they didn't spend all of the money they wanted, fans wanted them to, on guys like Christian Wilkins, on guys like Robert Hunt, and et cetera. Overall thoughts before we kind of just get into each of the 4 new additions that they brought in?
No, I think that's just a perfect way to kind of tee this up is we're going to get into the details together. So I think that's just a perfect way to do it. I don't think we need to tee it up any more than that.
Cool. Yeah, they brought 4 new players in. They did re-sign a couple guys, Tristan Colon, Blake Gillikin, the punter. They, before the legal tampering period started, they had brought in guys like Jesse Luketa, Carter O'Donnell, and then they tendered Greg Dortch, is probably the biggest name out of the aforementioned Cardinals. But as far as new signings went, the free agency period started, and Christian Wilkins got the bag, not from the Cardinals, but from the Las Vegas Raiders. And really quick, not to go on like a side tangent, Richie, but for everybody saying, well, the Cardinals didn't need to make that move because there's not exactly a Christian Wilkins away from competing. You could say the same about the Raiders, right?
Yeah, the Raiders aren't anywhere remotely close. So at the end of the day, I was one of the people who was banging the drum for the Cardinals to sign Christian Wilkins. And I understand the reason they didn't is, like you said, they are not a Christian Wilkins away from competing. And it's of course upsetting to see that the Cardinals didn't make that big splash. But at the same time, you have to understand the situation and know that from a team building aspect, that was not the move that you needed to do. And instead, the Cardinals go out and get not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 players on defense, 2 of whom play on the defensive line. So even though the Cardinals didn't get the big name brand in Christian Wilkins, they still were very active in free agency, and they were very active in trying to improve that defensive line. So there's strength in numbers, Donnie, and the Cardinals desperately needed numbers.
Yeah, speaking of numbers, the Wilkins contract, 4-year, $110 million.
That a lot?
That's just a little bit outside of Arizona's ballpark. The Cardinals definitely did have the cap space this year to go out and get it. But just talking with people within the organization in Indianapolis at the Combine, it was made very clear to me that they still think they are not exactly ready to compete for a Lombardi Trophy right away, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. The Wilkins deal, 4-year, $110 million. Time kind of went by really slow if you were a Cardinals fan. I believe the first signing that they had made was Shawn Murphy-Bunting, the corner. Started 14 games for the Tennessee Titans last year, was a very, very big part of that Buccaneers Super Bowl winning defense a few years ago. It's not the big name. It's not the L'Jarius Sneed, but I really like this pick.
I really, really liked it. So I did not realize he was a free agent. So when I saw that the Cardinals signed him, I got jazzed a little bit because Shawn Murphy-Bunting is a much better corner than people realize. So you look back, like you said, at that Super Bowl winning team with Tampa Bay, is they got surprisingly good play out of their corners from Shawn Murphy-Bunting and Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. They all stepped up. Shawn Murphy-Bunting had 70 tackles that year, a little over 70 tackles. Like, he is a sure tackler. He's somebody who can make plays on the football, and he's not going to lead the league in interceptions more than likely, but he's still somebody that's going to be able to go man-to-man with an opposing receiver. And you pair him with Garrett Williams and Catrell Clark in the slot, and I mean, that's a nice upgrade. Like, are the Cardinals done adding talent? Of course not. They still need to add guys, but you look at where you were at this time last year with Marco Wilson as your number 1 corner, and you know that you have made massive strides in improving that secondary. Shawn Murphy-Bunting, a very good pickup for not Arizona State, for the Arizona Cardinals. Very good pickup. I'm very excited about it. To me, this is one of the more underappreciated signings.
I would agree.
Honestly, yeah, it's a much better move than people realize. To get him on a 3-year deal. He's still young. He's very talented. I like it. I would give this move, if we were to grade, I would do at worst a B plus.
Yeah, this, like I said a little bit earlier, this is not the splash signing that everybody wanted. And like you had put in your article that you wrote this morning, like none of the guys Arizona signed are going to be selling jerseys. That's just not the kind of moves that this organization made. But they were trying to get good football players. They don't care about making splashes. They just wanted to get good ball players. And adding Murphy-Bunting to a secondary that heavily relied on rookies such as Keitrell Clark, Garrett Williams, Starling Thomas, and Antonio Hamilton last year, even Mack Wilson before he got cut. This room definitely needed an upgrade. Now, Shawn Murphy-Bunting, he's not an all-pro. He's not going to go out and lock down the number one receiver, but I definitely think we can say Arizona's cornerback room got not night and day better, but improved pretty well from before free agency to where we're at right now. And like you said, they're not done making changes at all. I still think they're going to add a body more or two. I do wonder if this spells the end for Antonio Hamilton in Arizona. He was kind of their like de facto CB1. Now with Shawn Murphy-Bunting taking over that role, with Gannon seemingly liking a lot of the young guys that had factored into the young cornerback room last year. I'm really just to see what happens with Ham, but just solely focused on Murphy-Bunting. I know a lot of people on Cardinals Twitter had gone and looked at his like PFF grades from last year with Tennessee. That was just like, excuse my French, but that was just a shit show from the beginning. His numbers were never going to be good on a Titans defense that was just dismal, right? I think if you really want to know what Murphy-Bunting can bring, go look at his Buccaneers tape, and you'll see exactly what you had talked about: being physical, being able to guard guys whenever commanded. And I hate to keep running this pocket circles, but not the best, not the greatest, not the flashiest, but their room did get better.
Yep. And at the end of the day, you can look at his tape with Tennessee and then 4 years with Tampa and understand that 80% of the time that he has spent in the NFL has been at a minimum quality, if not above average play. So I don't think that the Tennessee season was indicative of where he is right now. Like you said, I challenge viewers who can name more than 5 players on the Tennessee defense this past year, because outside of Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry, I guess Danico Autry, if you want to count Kevin Byard, you could, but yeah, I mean, there just was not much going on that defense. So Shawn Murphy-Bunting was never placed in a situation to be wildly successful. But again, you look at what was going on with the Buccaneers defense, and don't get me wrong, the Cardinals are not the Buccaneers defense, but he is going to a very friendly scheme with Jonathan Gannon. I'm not saying.
I also want to point out that with really, really good safety help behind him with Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson, that'll definitely make him a better player as well.
Right. And I'm not saying that the Cardinals defense is the Buccaneers defense, but it is a pretty nice improvement over Tennessee, who was just abysmal last year.
And that's crazy when you look at the Cardinals and how they played defensively in 2023. And that's saying something to say this Cardinals team is an improvement. But
right.
And any closing thoughts on Shawn Murphy-Bunting? I mean, just a good signing. Not great, not flashy, but also not bad. I know a lot of people are going to bitch about the contract. I think he's getting $6 million, somewhere around there this year. If he plays like he should, that's a very okay price tag with me.
Yeah, no issues with it. This is probably my favorite pickup the Cards have made so far.
Moving on to Bilal Nichols, you had brought up that the team did bring in 2 defensive linemen. The first was former Las Vegas Raiders defensive lineman Bilal Nichols. I'm looking at the numbers right now. Richie, 3-year, $21 million deal, $14.4 million guaranteed. He played every game the last 4 years for the Raiders, and he's played over 50% of defensive snaps since his rookie season. And I bring that up because the Cardinals defense suffered a lot of injuries last year, and they also rotate a lot of guys. The Arizona team had 5 defensive linemen play over 25% of snaps. They consistently have double-digit guys on the front seven play around that 30 to 40% snap range whenever you look at the snap counts from a week-to-week basis last year. Simply put, they needed bodies, and they needed good bodies. You can call it an overpay. The Cardinals did have cap space to spend. They weren't going to put it in a savings account for 2025, so they needed to give it to somebody, right? Just give me your thoughts on Nichols, kind of like Murphy-Bunting, although to me a little bit lesser extent. But you've seen flashes of what he can bring, especially as a pass rusher.
Yeah, this is one of those moves that ends up getting overlooked, and one of the moves that is going to end up being really underappreciated. And I know I said that about Shawn Murphy-Bunting, so I'm not meaning to feed a fed horse, but this is even more so because Nichols is the guy who does some of the dirty work, and he was a very underappreciated player during his time with the Raiders, is because he has a big body, and he's someone who can eat up blocks and double teams and keep the jerseys clean of the linebackers behind him. He's good at what he does. Is he elite? No. Is he a Pro Bowler? No. But again, with the trend of the guys that the Cardinals are bringing in, is you're not looking for them to be Pro Bowlers and be top jersey sellers in the league. You're just looking for them to play sound football, play as a unit, and, just take that step forward under Jonathan Gannon. This is a quality pickup. And we're going to say that about the other two pickups as well. And I mean, is Shawn Murphy-Bunting too? Are any of these moving the needle? Maybe not necessarily, but you're still improving the defense, and you're doing it by adding guys that aren't going to cost you nearly as much. I mean, you brought in all four of these guys for less than what Christian Wilkins signed, and you get Bilal Nichols and you get Justin Jones together on the same defensive line for a fraction of what the contract for Wilkins was. You still have to be happy because at worst, these are quality starters.
Yeah, and I do want to point out, according to the Pro Football Reference, he was a defensive tackle with the Raiders last year, but he also played some defensive end for the Bears in his prior stop whenever he first got into the league too. He'll be 28 whenever the regular season gets underway next year. And I think that's a kind of a theme that the Cardinals were targeting. Maybe not the most elite names, but versatility is definitely a big thing for the Cardinals. Getting those younger guys around that 26 to 27-year-old range, 28. I think that was very important too, to kind of keep the age limit under 30. Shout out to Leonardo DiCaprio. I think when your best defensive lineman is Jonathan Ledbetter, and that is no disrespect to him. I know he could
not at all
stomp me anytime he wanted to. But like when your name brand guy is him, you need more help. And not that Jones or Nichols are going to be moving the needle at all, like you said, but they needed help. And I think that's exactly what they did. You can tell immediately what they thought was the biggest need in free agency, and that was defensive line.
Yep. And that's to me, that's a perfect segue right into Justin Jones, unless you have anything else you want to add.
Nah, let's keep this train going. Former Bears, I did like the picture of him sacking Kyler Murray from last year. Played 68 and 69% of defensive snaps the last 2 years, respectively, for him. He didn't miss a game the last prior 2 years as well. In 2023, he had 49 tackles, 4.5 sacks, 4 passes batted down, and 17 quarterback hits. And we talk a lot about the edge position, Richie, and how the Cardinals do need to get better. 33 team sacks last year, third bottom from the NFL. That pressure can also come from the defensive interior. And Justin Jones, dollar for dollar, is probably as good as they wanted to target in free agency.
He is a very, very, I'm gonna say it again.
Don't say it.
The quality pickup. But the thing that I appreciate about Justin Jones is there is better pass rushing prowess here than people realize. Again, he had 4.5 sacks last year. I want to say he's got 10.5 sacks over the last 3 years. He is a very underappreciated pass rusher, especially from the defensive interior, because he is playing at 300 pounds. So you're not looking for him to lead the team in sacks. You're not looking for him to be 8-7 sacks, whatever it might be. But he gets you another 4.5 sacks, you're going to be happy with that production. He is somebody that can wreak a little bit of havoc on the inside. And you pair him with Bilal Nichols, and you've got two big 300-pound guys that should be able to complement each other, because Nichols can slide a little bit closer to nose at 320 plus pounds. And Justin Jones is going to be another big guy as well. And the Cardinals did not have very much presence from their interior last year. Well,
Nope.
you just added 2 ass kickers to your interior line. Like, I understand they're not name brand guys. Like, it's not the Christian Wilkins, but
Mhm.
this is still a very, very solid pickup for them. And Justin Jones is someone that I was actually kind of excited to see. Like, don't get me wrong, when I first heard, I was like, I feel like I know that name. And I took a look and I was like, I know that name because the Bears didn't have very many guys to write home about last year. And yet here
Sure.
was Justin Jones coming out and breaking the mold a little bit for them. Now he comes to Arizona. He should be able to be the same kind of guy. Underappreciated, doing a little bit of the dirty work for the team and playing better than people can realize.
Yep, and then to continue the trend that Nichols kind of set, Jones will be 28 when next season starts. Jones is 6'3", 309 pounds. He's a versatile guy, according to Pro Football Reference. Again, he's previously lined up at both tackle and defensive end. So, it's just there's trends here. They went and they got guys who can stay healthy. Although Shawn Murphy-Bunting did kind of miss some time the last couple of years, but they got guys that can stay healthy, that can line up at different positions, that are under the age of 29, 30. It was very clear what identity the Cardinals wanted to establish here. I really like the term that you had used in your article this morning, misfit toys. I don't think that carries a negative connotation either.
Not at all.
I mean, the amount of people who had projected them to go get these crazy big names. I mean, it just felt like that was kind of a stretch for where the Cardinals were. Nonetheless, though, I still feel like you said, these are very, very good pickups. And then moving on to the final edition of their first day of free agency, Mack Wilson. We've talked about defensive line. We've talked about edge. We've talked about corner. We haven't really talked about inside linebacker a whole lot. And granted, that is because of Kaiser White manning the middle. He should be coming back just fine from his torn bicep suffered in week 11. But they needed a good running mate for Kaiser in the interior. And what a better guy to go get than Mack Wilson, a speedy guy. And we need to talk about this a little bit too, Rich. He lined up that edge a lot last year for the Patriots during the final second half of the season, 3.5 sacks in the last 5 games. We've seen what Jonathan Gannon can do. We've seen what Nick Rallis can do defensively in Philly with those linebackers. They did like to move them around a little bit. Is this that guy? Is Mack Wilson going to kind of be that rover in the front 7 for them?
I don't know what the future necessarily holds from him, but what I do know is that he does more things than one. And he's somebody who's more interested in playing for what's best for the team than what's best for him. Because you look at him when he was at Alabama, and this was a middle linebacker and somebody who was definitely more in charge of being that rover that you mentioned. But then he comes to the Browns, and they kind of want to play him in that same role. They move him to New England through trade, and New England starts getting creative with him. And while he's not an elite pass rusher or anything like that, you still like that he's willing to move around. You like that he's willing to be taking on more than a single assignment. You don't find many guys like that are willing to do a little bit of everything. He's a gritty player. He's somebody who is more interested in the team success than his own success. So you pair Mack Wilson with Kaiser White, and you are looking at 2 guys who are willing to fly around the field and make tackles. Like, I'll say this is an overreaction for sure. You might have just added your second 100 tackle guy if Kaiser White is able to be healthy. My logic behind that is Jonathan Gannon had 200 tackle guys when he was running that Philly defense, Kaiser White and TJ Edwards. And Edwards was a very underappreciated guy. Mack Wilson, a very underappreciated guy. You might see these 2 just mesh really well together and find ways to complement each other, because Kaiser will be running the defense and Mack Wilson should be kind of your joker, if you will, and just be able to move him all over the place. that kind of creativity that you can get with him is what makes this a very, very, very good signing.
No, I like it a lot. One of PFF's best coverage linebackers last year. He played in all 34 games for New England the last 2 years. Another healthy guy that is very versatile and, can help Jonathan Gannon's defense out a lot. Not the biggest names, Richie, not groundbreaking, earth-shattering moves that, is going to help bring a Lombardi trophy back home to Glendale. But certainly when you look at the foundation they're building, when you look at what they're trying to do defensively, when you look at the overall big picture of the Arizona Cardinals, not only in 2024, but moving on, because all those guys got 3-year deals. When you look at the big picture, you see what's happening. And I feel like if you're not expecting the Cardinals to go out and compete and spend every penny right away, you can kind of appreciate what they're doing because they're doing this the right way, right? Like, how many times did we see Steve Keim go out and try to make big name after big name come to the desert and just swing and miss on those guys? Now, granted, like, he did bring in guys like DeAndre Hopkins. Rodney Hudson was good the first year he was here in Arizona. J.J. Watt obviously, made his impact felt wherever he was here, but it didn't work. It did not work. And I just want to commend the front office. I want to commend Monty Austin for it and assistant general manager Dave Sears for really doing this thing the right way and rebuilding a football team like it should be done.
Yep. It's all about adding quality players. It's not necessarily about adding big names, because if we rewind to the last 10 years, some of the teams who consistently were adding big names were like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who outside of a couple of seasons are typically meddling teams. Like, it's not always working out when you add big name guys. You saw it perfectly. Benjamin Solak from The Ringer put out a great tweet and said, when you see these teams that add the big name players, it's typically not indicative of them being a good football program. It more often than not is the teams that are trying to be better and the teams that are trying to sell jerseys and get attention and whatnot. And the Cardinals aren't interested in doing that. They did it last year. They're doing it this year. Again, to reference the article I wrote this morning, check it out if you haven't, is the Cardinals are building a team of misfit toys. And what I mean by that is that these are the scrap players, the quote-unquote scrap players. Nobody wanted these guys because they're not the Pro Bowl caliber players, but yet they're guys that do multiple things. They're guys that are willing to play hard and prove themselves. So sure, you're not going to see a lot of Shawn Murphy-Bunting jerseys next year for the Cardinals, but you know what? He might be a fan favorite by the end of the year. Same with these other 3 guys as well. You're not building this team with what you would consider star power, but instead you're building this team with players who are willing to work hard. And at the end of the day, that's worth its weight in gold.
I think you just took every word out of my mouth. So on that note, we are going to wrap this free agency edition of the All Cardinals podcast up. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of it. Words are hard today. Go to follow Richie on Twitter at RichieBrads36. Follow me on Twitter or X at Don Drew. Follow our work at allcardinals.com or sf.com/NFL/Cardinals. Until then.